So I can see that we're now up to 12 o'clock, lunchtime here in the UK. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start today's session and formally welcome everyone to this live webinar today. We're actually going to be joined by two guests. First of all, we're going to be joined by Fiona Leteney. And Fiona is a senior analyst at the Fosway Group, Europe's #1 HR industry analytics company. Fiona joined Fosway in 2016 and is the primary lead on research in the learning systems market. We're also joined by Marie Redor. Marie is the head of product at Rise Up, who are an interactive all-in-one training solution for corporate learning. Marie joined the company in 2019, where she's built an ambitious and successful product team committed to delivering value to their customers. So Fiona and Marie, welcome to you both. Nice to have you with us.
Welcome. Hello, sorry.
No, well, welcome to you both. Nice to have you with us. Before I hand over to you, what I'd like to do, I'd like to pose a question, if I may, to the delegates in the room. I'd like to ask you just to pop into the chat panel. How would you define adaptive learning? I think it would just be very interesting to take the sort of temperature gauge of the room. So do pop into the chat panel how you would define adaptive learning. And I think it would be quite interesting just to take that temperature gauge from the room before we hand over formally to Fiona and Marie. So feel free just to tap away. I know it'll take a few minutes to pop things into the chat panel, and I know then all of a sudden it will start to roll through. So just pop into the chat panel. Here we go. So let's just see what's coming in. What I'm going to try and do is read some of those out as they're coming in. So let's just have a look. Phil is saying learning resources, pathways, personalized to the individual. Jay is saying adaptive to the current level of knowledge of the learner. Olga Lolior is saying context and flexing. Diane is saying flexible methods of learning suited to the individual needs. Thank you everyone for popping in the comments. Let's just have a look. Pat is saying flexible learning, so many coming in. I can't really keep up. Karen is saying learning that is tailored to the individual. Fiona and Marie, are they the sorts of things that you were expecting to come in when we posed that question?
I think we can go home. I think, yeah, everybody knows everything about adaptive learning. I think that's great. And it's obviously a very informed, very interested audience there. Yeah, so I like that. I would pick up on the terms of the content that's delivered to the learner is personalized, so it's adapted, and it's very specific for that learner, and it can happen dynamically as well. So that would be my kind of picking up on that. But there's a lot of variations, if you like. How about you, Marie?
Yeah, I guess and in the definition we've received, there is like this two notion of macro adaptive learning, how you suggest content adapted to the level of the person, and micro adaptive learning, which would be, to my mind, how you adapt the type of content you show to people depending on what suits them best. So yeah, I guess it's pretty complete, all the answers we received.
Yeah, that's good. And by the way, yeah, Manchester is raining as well, has already been pointed out by Fatima. I'm pleased that there's somebody else in Manchester. So yeah, that's good. So shall we sort of find out who's actually using adaptive learning? Is that
I've got a poll here. Let me just pop this onto the screen, Fiona. Hopefully now you can see that. Are you already using adaptive learning? So feel free to use the poll. If there is anything that you'd like to add that doesn't come into the yes or no, then feel free to pop it into the chat panel. I'll just give it a few more seconds. I can see them, all the responses rolling in. Quite an interesting response. What I'll do is I'll just give it a few more seconds. I can see that over 70% of the room have responded, so thank you for that. What I'll do is I'll close it down in 3, 2, 1. I'll just end the poll now, and I will share those results. So you should be able to see those up on your screen now. So are you ready to use adaptive learning? 41% have said yes, and 59% have said no. How does that, are they the sorts of figures that you were expecting to see, Fiona and Marie?
Actually, that surprises me, to be honest,
Yes.
because I would not have expected as many people to have been using it yet. But obviously, yeah, there's perhaps a gathering together of all those that are really interested in adaptive and maybe wanting to find more information about it. So so I think there's going to be some polls and things later that would help to think about how are you actually using it, but we'll leave that till a little bit later. But that's is that the same for you, Marie?
Yeah, I guess it's also, but what we've seen, like when we were discussing with some of our users on adaptive learning, is that there are a few companies also that are using it. I mean, not by using a tool, but that are trying even manually and with processes to adapt and suggest the best content for people depending on their knowledge. And I guess there is either people that are really, like you said, interested in adaptive learning and already using it, or also there might be some people, I mean, like adaptive learning is not just a new thing, it's also something that we've been digitalizing, but that is basically what teachers have been doing with learners for a long time. So probably also there can be things like that.
And it's interesting, there's some comments which you may have seen coming in the chat, and Susan has just said, and perhaps it's something we might be able to address a little bit later on. Susan is saying, I wish the business is not ready for it yet. There's a huge cultural change required.
So
yes.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely. So is it worth me talking now about what's been going on in the market, what we're seeing as from a Fosway perspective?
I think that would be, yeah, if you're able, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think everybody knows, well, tends to know Fosway for the fact that we have a 9-grid, and so this is the 9-grid that was published in February this year, and this is the learning systems one. And for those of you that are joining from Thailand or Virginia, as I saw, we do very much focus on Europe. We have a global view, but when we create a 9-grid, it's about the vendors that are being that have customers that are headquartered in Europe to a greater or lesser extent, and the greater or lesser extent is how far across the performance part, the axis, if you like, a vendor actually is. Now, this might be very, very confusing if this is the first time you've seen it, and I'm not going to go into detail. There are other places you can go to learn about the grid, but a couple of things I wanted to point out is that the circles are the suites, and as actually Marie said sort of at the beginning, Rise Up. So Rise Up have actually joined the grid for the first time this year, so congratulations to them. But it's an end-to-end solution. All right, if you have just got the budget for one system, then the suite is where you need to be looking. But what we've also got on there are the squares, and the squares are specialists. and it is likely that you would add a specialist into an existing ecosystem. It wouldn't necessarily be your first system. Now, on the grid, there are 4, and I won't go into detail of who they are, but there are 4 adaptive learning specialists. You can download the report to find out who they are, because we name what they're specializing in. And so there are 4 specialists on there that are very specifically adaptive learning specialists. There's a new one that's just joined the grid, and there are others that are kind of in the wings, sort of waiting to join. And it's very dependent on whether they're operating in Europe or starting to operate in Europe, whether they make it onto the grid. But the other thing that is interesting is that as Rise Up are doing, and also there's at least another suite that is adding the adaptive capability into their existing functional range. And so what we're seeing, and you know, as I was surprised at the numbers on the call that are actually already using adaptive, it is actually a small number of folks that are using it. So what are we seeing from a corporate perspective? So as I've already, you know, just saying here, there are some vendors that are joining. You know, they're noticing that people are starting to ask about it. Now, this particular slide was used in our Ask the Analyst session, and so that's why it's got those key headlines. And I've highlighted the fact that what we're seeing is that personalization is so much more of interest to the buyers than it has been. It's, as Marie was saying, we've been doing this for a long time, and it's the personalization that we've been doing for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And what we are seeing, and if you perhaps move on to the next slide, then it's about the solution trends that we're seeing, again, downloaded from the report. It's at the back end of the report. It's not just about the image, the 9 grid, and we have both market trends and solution trends. And there's a paragraph. These are the headlines. There's a paragraph on each of these, and there's a paragraph about this, the personalization, and what we're you know, talking about here is the fact that actually personalization has been going on for forever. The way that learning systems have perhaps done it over the last 20 odd years is by making sure that the learner's profile is taken into account when assigning content. So it could be to do with their role, their position in the organization, geography, you know, there's a whole range of things there, what language they're using, etc., and you can personalize it that way. So that's been going on for quite some time, to a greater or lesser extent. We've then got what started to appear are the recommendations engines, and again, it's from the sort of the consumer technology that has made the learner and the buyers a little bit more interested in how can the learning system help to personalize. Now, we're a little bit skeptical about the recommendations engines. I mean, I don't know about you, but in my personal life, from a, you know, whether it's Netflix or whether it's Amazon or whatever, I don't take a great deal of notice of what they're recommending to me. I'm wanting to go my own particular way. So there is still a way to go to kind of get those right. But what we're also seeing is what I'm tending to call the ultimate in personalization is this adaptive learning. And there are lots of different ways that you know, even the specialists on the grid, different ways that they're doing this. So there's an overall, as we've already started to define what adaptive looking is about. It's about personalization. It's about making sure that dynamically the individual is getting the right content at the right time, that you know, that it's not just about one size fitting all. So I think, I mean, Marie, I'll shut up now. How's Rise Up kind of looking at it from adaptive point of view? As I say, there are different vendors are doing it in different ways. How's Rise Up doing it?
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. I think one of the important thing that we've been doing is that when we begin with this adaptive learning subject, as a lot of you said on the chat, we see that it's a trend in the market. Every client is talking about it, but it's not so easy to really put it in place and use it. There are only a few really mature clients that are able to use it fully. And so what we try to do is really to discuss with our beta testers, our users, and see what are their real need and how we can make it simpler than what it seems, because sometimes adaptive learning can mean one thing and everything, and it's a bit confusing. So if I like sum up the global path of what we're building at the moment, the idea is to start by having an idea of what the learner needs and skills are at the beginning when he lands on the platform. So be able to have positioning tests made with linked to skills and be able to see where the learners are on different skills. Then when this is done, there is two solutions, and a lot of our users were saying that the first is maybe enough for the moment. The first solution is just to let teachers, trainers read the results of this positioning test and decide which training should the learner do. The second solution is to move even deeper with adaptive path, that is a path adapted to the skills the learner have, like the level they have on certain skills. So if on a certain skill you have this level, you will be redirected to this training. For the second step of the path, you have this level, you're redirected to this training. And maybe for the third step of the path, you don't even have to do a training because your skill is enough for your job. You have what you need to have. So this is getting deeper, and even if it's something that some tool already let admin organize in their platform, we question this a little bit because we have to move to this. But for now, some of our users were saying that they just need to put things in place, really trust the system and the fact that recommendations are good, and then really get into the bottom of this and do this fully. So we put this in two-step: positioning, test, adaptive path. Then what seems also important for us is the anchoring and revision. So you don't just learn at one point and then it's okay, like you have the skill you need for the rest of your life. We want really, with adaptive learning, to make the training and the job you have really related, and make sure that you can use what you learn in training in your daily job life. So anchoring and revision is a way to, with algorithm, see how good you are on a certain skill after the training, and remind you with questions things that you might have forgotten. So it's also very important and part of our adaptive learning system for us. And the last thing is that you can do all of this, but if you have like trainings that are not adapted to people at the first place, this is not really useful. You would get people frustrated because they would do positioning tests and then they will have no suggestion on trainings because none of them are adapted to them. So what's really important is to use the data you have on learners throughout the positioning test, etc., the anchoring and revision, and we give you that data to let you adapt your catalog depending on the skills your learner need. So yeah, basically if 50% of the learners need a training on this skill, we encourage you to create one. Or if on the contrary, you have a lot of trainings on the skill that already every people in your company manage, we'll maybe encourage you to put more energy in some of our trainings. So that's basically the global cycle of this. And
so going back, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
So
I was
going
going
back,
to.
going back to the sort of the beginning. So what we're seeing is the kind of in broad terms, maybe two different ways of looking at adaptive, and you mentioned, I think, both of them, but there's that pathway of taking somebody from a particular skill position to upskilling or reskilling position, and taking them through existing courses. And I think this is actually interesting because one of the things that we've seen over the years is some of the adaptive vendors are, to create the content. So if it's just about the questions and just about creating that content, feeding that content engine can actually be quite a big effort. So, I mean, we often say within the reports, don't underestimate the amount of works that is involved in adaptive learning. It's great to have that specific personalization, but it can take quite a bit of effort to it's not just okay, let's buy this, install it, and then it's job done. You do need to put time in. But there are some vendors that are also saying that actually with your existing content, we can guide you through a sort of a pathway. And so that's a much more sort of maybe a macro sort of level from that perspective. Does that make sense to you, Marie? Do you,
Yeah, and I think it answers also a question we just had in the chat, like on the different approach to designing adaptive learning compared to standard learning, let's say. And we need in adaptive learning to try to have the smaller bits maybe in the training possible to make everything adaptable. I mean, we also need to try to check the data to create training adapted to people's need. So it's really different from a classical approach that would be, okay, I'm a teacher, I know what I want to teach, and I just give it to people in a very nice PPT, and that's all. You have really to split things, try to also create maybe different trainings for different levels, create different contents for different types of people. So maybe create the same content in video and in text because you will have different people with different needs. So it's what you can have with this is change the way people see learning in your online academy and let them really see how it brings them value in their job, in their life. But so it makes training more efficient, I mean, but it's a change, and that's how what we're saying. Some people also at the beginning, is really the market ready for this? I think some people might be, and some use cases are really nice to work on this. But for some other markets, it's still a bit early, and it's still. I mean, in some markets, it's still new to have online academies, etc. So doing adaptive learning is even getting deeper.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there needs to be a certain amount of maturity in the within L&D, but within the organisation to be ready for it in a way. Although there's another area that can be different in the various vendors, and again, it's up to the buyer to kind of decide which works for them. So some vendors are not kind of fully AI or machine learning, and there may be an algorithm, but it's kind of hard coded. And I think sometimes the question is asked first, and then depending on how you answer that question, or even how confident you are in the answer to that, will kind of allow the system to provide the right type of content, which I think you've already mentioned, Marie. So I think that there is that those differences. So not all of them are actually AI, but I think the majority of the more mature ones are going either that way or going that way. Is that the way that you're going, Maria? Is it an AI driven system that you're implementing, you're designing, should I say?
Yeah, I think like what we're trying to do is we're developing a tool that lets you create your whole system with questions related to skills that you like people, positioning tests, etc. And for some parts that may be a bit difficult for a company to set up, like if you need to, at the beginning, to have a skill repository to handle all of this. When you don't have it, it can take a lot of time. So we try to have standard repositories in place in the platform. When you need, for example, like you said, to use your existing content to create questions or to link this content to skills and put it in the adaptive learning system. We try to use AI, like basic AI OCR, to read the content, analyze it, and suggest what it should be related to. And for what's upcoming, we see AI as a tool to really do the complex predictions that would be very difficult to set up, like with logic. If this training contains this and this, it is related to this. It's very complicated. So AI is a mean, for example, to define what is the difficulty of a training in the adaptive path, or it could be a way also to define, depending on the behavior of a learner, if he's happy with the training he's doing, or if he might stop the training in the middle and we should adapt it. So there is AI is an interesting tool to in the prediction part and the OCR part for us to help our clients really putting this global system in place.
And I think you're right that as I mentioned before, it can be quite difficult to kind of create the content, and some vendors are beginning to use AI to help that creation. So taking up a lot of the workload, if you like, to create that. And I think going back to what I was saying before about AI and the recommendations engines, that's AI being used in probably too broad a way, and it's in those focused areas that you get the best benefits of AI, and that's what we're seeing as well, that it being used in very specific areas, and this is one in terms of generally for adaptive, but also in the creation of the content as well. I think one of the other things I was going to mention as well is the differences that we're seeing generally is that the gamification of I suppose the questions that some are going down the route of, because they need to kind of engage, and we'll come on, I think, quite quickly on to what use cases we're talking about for some of these. But for example, you know, if it is that it's a repetition piece that you're wanting to do, so that it's knowledge testing, making sure that people on the front line are kind of being able to remember the product knowledge or whatever, then to kind of engage them, some of the systems are actually putting a sort of a gamification in there. And again, I mean, gamification can be a bit Marmite, if sorry, that's a very English idiom.
I have the reference.
Yeah. You either love it or you hate it, and gamification sort of comes across that way as well. So again, it's about who your audience is in an organization, you know, how this is being used. So yeah, I don't know whether you have any thoughts on gamification, Marie.
I think like yeah, you're right. Then I guess we can move on to use cases, but I agree with you. Gamification is a little bit like Marmite, and some people are really will really respond to it, some not. The way I see it, and I think it's an opinion. Like everyone can have a different one, but adaptive learning is in a way a different way of trying to engage learner than gamification, or maybe more authoritative way of doing learning and forcing people to do some training when there is regulation. So for me, there is those three ways of engaging. Either you really remind people all of the time, you have to do this training, you have to do this training, please do it. Or you work on gamification and you try to get them involved with games. Or adaptive learning can be another way. They all can be complementary. But there are different ways of addressing this issue of how you engage people. And what I think is nice in adaptive learning is that it's engaging people by like not taking them as fools, but really being transparent to them, saying, okay, this training will bring you that and is adapted to you. So I think you should do it. And when you do it, you can feel what it will really bring to you. And I think it's more. I see. I'm sometimes I get a bit into politics when I speak of adaptive learning, but I think it's more like culturally. I see it as a better way of engaging people because you're true to them, and gamification could be nice, but it's not it shouldn't be the only mean to engage people, I mean.
Yeah, true. So do we need to find out if any those that aren't already doing adaptive, whether they're thinking about it for the future? Is there another poll that Michael, we could do? And are there any questions as well from the? I did actually spot a question, and it was just a quick one where I think it was Fatima asking if Rise Up is of the same sort of brand as Articulate Rise. I can say no, definitely not. Marie, do you want to answer that one as well?
I'm not sure I understood it completely. So, maybe I will find it.
Yeah, no, don't worry. All I can say is no, Rise Up is not part of the Articulate brand. Articulate Rise. It's a completely separate, and yeah,
it's different.
Creating a learning system. So
yeah, it's Rise is a word that is used a lot in the learning area, so it can be confusing. But no, we're on our side.
So I've launched the poll. Hopefully, you can see it up on your screens. We've got about 53% responded. I'll give it a second or two more. Quite interesting results coming through. So I'll close it in 3, 2, 1. So thank you for all those that have taken part. And let me just share those results with both Fiona, Marie, and the room as well. So there are the results. Surprised? Anything you weren't expecting there, or you were expecting?
What's interesting is that it's really different than the first one. So we have less people that say that they're already using it now than at the beginning. So maybe when we defined it in details, it's changed a little bit the way the people answered the question.
Or maybe all those that didn't answer are already using it. That could be the other option. But it's good to. I think those that are saying that it's too complicated, I think, you know, it is a complex, you know, it's not to be taken on lightly. But I love the fact that, you know, 43% there are ready to explore, and that, you know, there are those that are kind of looking for more information. So, so I think, you know, now is what we're seeing is now is the time for, you know, that people are starting to talk about it. It's beginning to be much more recognized. I mean, adaptive learning has been around for years, and there have been vendors out there as well doing it. And I think, as Marie said, you know, sometimes it's being used in the education market before it's actually being passed across to the corporate market, which is what we're focusing on here. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting that now, I think now is just it's beginning to pique people's interests, I think, because people want to have personalized learning. You know, I've been in this industry for 20 years more, and we've always talked about being able to deliver, or wanting to deliver through online learning, what people need to know minus what they already know. And the thing is, we've not delivered that, not in online learning, up until what we're kind of now talking about, and it's the adaptive that is going to do that. And so we need to bite the bullet and start.
And I think like the fact that it's beginning to be to get more and more interest is also linked to some use cases that really went well, and we see that it's used in some areas, like regulatory areas where people need to maintain knowledge at a certain level all the time to be able to do their job, like pilots or things like that. And also in education, like you said, retail. So there are some areas that really needed a solution like that and begin to use specialist solution or build their own solution. And now they are like spreading the word, saying that it's really nice. It lets people acquire the same amount of knowledge, if I sum up, in a minimum time, and it's really like you know, there are those regulatory trainings that before you had to do for 12 hours a year to make sure that you had the right amount of knowledge. And now with adaptive learning in some countries, when an adaptive learning system is in place, you can just do the training in less time, and it's still okay, because we see that it's really working. And so I guess that's why. I don't know what you think, Fiona, but I guess that's part of how it's getting bigger and bigger. But the other industries are beginning with it, so it's a bit difficult at the beginning to.
Yeah, no, I think I've seen been pleasantly surprised the way that adaptive is starting to be used even in the compliance area. So, you know, I think, you know, I don't know, it would be useful for folks to put into chat if they're using adaptive, what's the use case they're using it for. It would be really good to just hear what everybody else is using. But the type of use case that that I've come across certainly is that front end worker, if you like. It could be call center, it could be retail, and it's the product knowledge that it's being used for, and very, very successfully. But I think, as I was just saying, the compliance piece, I mean, we have been, you know, doing the compliance, and everybody has to go through the same thing, or they maybe have a little bit of a refresher. But it means that everybody hates the compliance, and if just a few questions, if there's a campaign that is created of, you know, of questions that over a period of time, just to, you know, to make sure that the those compliance, the knowledge is there, then I think that is, you know, it's a great use of adaptive, and that's beginning to be used as well, which is good. And so it means that you haven't got that, you know, sort of whether it's every year or whatever, for all the various compliance pieces in an organization, that you know, it's mandatory to go through it. Let's do it in a slightly different way that's using adaptive, is based on the knowledge of the individual.
People can really like be focused on the content they read, instead of having a certain amount of hours to spend and being just clicking on the next slide to make it go faster. Here we are really, yeah, I feel like I said earlier, trusting people, saying, okay, you have to do this, you have to know this, you're at this level, so let's answer a few questions and you'll get to this point. And that's nice. I mean, for compliance, but compliance is an area where, you know, you need people to know certain things. But I mean, it's the same for other trainings. We really need trainings to be efficient, useful to people, or if they're not, I mean, we're spending money for nothing, and we're also losing the trust of people that will say, okay, I went on the academy, it was not useful, so I'll just stop going there. So that's
Yeah, exactly. It's losing that trust. It's yeah, not a good look for L&D, if you like.
Exactly.
Michael, did you pick up on? I mean, there's been loads of comments and things I've not been able to keep.
So many questions coming in. One thing that I did just want to go back on is picking up on what Susan said about needing to be a huge cultural change, etc. Have you guys got any thoughts of how we should be starting to talk to the business, as you're saying, you know, now the time is right? What should we be talking about? How should we be talking to those senior business leaders?
From my perspective, it would be about the picking an area that it is of interest to the business, that is important. You know, the impact of the training is going to have an effect on the bottom line, and just to be able to, you know, and I noticed on one of the chat areas, it was sort of somebody commented in chat about sales, and quite often I think adaptive learning is being used in a sales enablement, and it's a, you know, it's a good place for that to happen, because you can often have some sort of ROI on it there. So I would say it's just pick an area. Don't try and boil the ocean and, you know, do everything adaptive. Just pick some areas and start to show how it can work, and how, you know, what impact it can actually have on the business.
Yeah, I think you're completely right, Fiona. It's and I think that to start, you can pick an area like a training or a field on which a specific thing you want people to know, and you can start by having an adaptive way of doing training without needing a tool at the beginning, and then you get bigger when you have proved that it was worth it. For example, like you can start by rather than registering people to a training that you think will be nice for them, creating a first training with a quiz where you ask people a certain amount of questions where that will let you know where they are in their skills. Depending on this test, you take the time to create a training or several trainings adapted to the different populations that you had with the results of this quiz, and then you let people train, learn, and after all of this, you do the positioning test again, and you check how they evolved, and you can, with a little proof of concept like that, prove how it went. You can also send an evaluation, a satisfaction evaluation to learners to have an idea of how they felt, like being listened to at the beginning, before being registered to training, etc. And I mean, if you do that, I'm pretty sure you will have good results, and you'll be able to dig deeper into this adaptive learning. And it's taking some time. I mean, it's not, but it's not complicated technically. It's just taking the time to do this right, test how it goes, and then try to make it bigger.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question, which, apologies for the pronunciation of the first name, is Perian, has said, I need to start implementing adaptive learning into my organization. What would you advise as being the first 3 steps I would need to start doing for a quick win?
I think it's maybe what I just said, or I hope it answers a little bit the question, but yeah, beginning with what Fiona said, an area, building a training based on the feedback of users on a quiz for the skill, seeing after the training how the skills evolved, how learner felt about the trainings they did, and I guess it's a first step. Then you show the results, the reports of what you did to your business leaders, and maybe try to compare it with the trainings you have today, even if it might be a bit yeah, a bit confusing, but just showing that it works and that people were happy with it, and that it didn't take, maybe also measure the time you spent on it, the resources you would need to really do all trainings like that. But I mean, make a plan, test and make a plan.
Fiona, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other phrase I would put in there that we've not used the whole of this session, which is interesting when we're talking about adaptive learning, is data driven. So everything is, needs to be data driven, and that, with the right amount of data, then all sorts of we can show that we're having an impact, and I think that is the ultimate goal at the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you both very much indeed, and thank you for everyone for your questions and comments. As Fiona said earlier on, it's been so difficult to keep up with them because we've had so many coming in all at the same time. So thank you, everyone. It really has been a conversation. So thank you both, Marie and Fiona, for your time today.
Thank you.
Pleasure. It's been good.